So what's really critical is that this is what was very intelligent about Jewish settlers in the United States, that they formed these networks that went from town to town. So a Jew in LA would do business with a Jew in San Francisco who would be getting some of his dry goods from a relative in New York. And so as they grew, they were able to rely on these national networks to grow. So anyway, Hellman had one of the few safes in town, and he began to store people's gold and gold dust. And he eventually realized he could make more money as a banker than he could as a dry goods person. Okay. This is Hellman with his beautiful facial hair, the Van Dyke beard. Next one. So this is Los Angeles in around 1870. As you can see, while San Francisco was sort of a cosmopolitan city, LA still had one-story adobes, and it wasn't very developed. Next one. So Hellman opened his first bank in that building on the left, and it was right next to the Bella Union Hotel, which was the fanciest hotel in town. And 2 years later, he dissolved his partnership and formed a new partnership with a man named John Downey, who was the former governor of California. And they raised $500,000 in capital and started something called the Farmers and Merchants Bank. And it would become the largest and strongest bank in Los Angeles, and absolutely critical to the development of Southern California, which is what I'll talk about now. Hellman would serve as its president for 50 years. So I mentioned earlier that Hellman had sort of tamed the financial system of the Wild West. Well, when California became a state, the people who wrote up the Constitution said, well, we have a lot of gold in this state. We don't need money. We don't need banks. Let's make banks illegal. They didn't like banks. Everyone thought bankers were out to cheat people. They remembered times in the East when a lot of banks went under because they were not well managed. So in 1849, they banned banks in California. But what this meant was that if you wanted to borrow money, if you wanted to start a business, you had to go find a private money lender to lend you some money. And these people had a very nice monopoly, particularly in Southern California, which was further away from San Francisco. So people would lend money at these really high interest rates, as high as 15% a month. And this is how so many California families lost their ranchos. There's one famous story of a loan that John Downey made. This is Hellman's new partner. He lent a man named Lemuel Carpenter $5,000 in 1852. And I don't think Carpenter quite realized what he was getting into, because in 7 years that debt had grown to more than $100,000. And there was no way that he could pay off this debt. And so Carpenter committed suicide the day before the sheriff's auction. And John Downey went in and bought the land at a bargain rate. So the opening of the Farmers and Merchants Bank, for the first time, afforded people an opportunity to borrow money at a reasonable rate. And it really was a very important catalyst to the development of the economy down there, because more and more people were coming to LA after after the Civil War. They'd heard about the climate, they heard about the great land, and so Farmers and Merchants Bank was able to make loans and really help the development of the city. So over the next 20 years, Hellman grew enormously influential. Here's an ad of his first bank, Hellman Temple and Company. I just had to throw this in. I am not really talking about Hellman's Jewish identity specifically tonight, but this is the first temple in Los Angeles called B'nai B'rith, and it was built in 1872, and Hellman was the president of the temple when it was built. Okay, so by 1877, Hellman, who'd come to the United States with like $30 in his pocket, was able to build this beautiful mansion on Main Street. It cost about $13,000, and it had amazing frescoes in it and this sort of big porch. And it was considered the loveliest mansion in town. As I was mentioning earlier, if you're a businessman and there are no industries, you have your choice of what you want to invest in. So Hellman and a group of people just like him invested in everything. They became the major owners of the water company, of the gas company. They built all the trolley lines. And they helped bring the railroad to Los Angeles. So there was an opportunity to make a tremendous amount of money. I'm just going to give you one example of one of the industries he's involved in, just to show how it contributed to the development of Southern California. As soon as IW could save enough money, he started to buy land in Southern California. He bought his first parcel in 1863, and he didn't sell it for the rest of his life. When he bought the parcel of land his house was on, it was so far out of the city that he had to convince a friend to come and build a house next to him. So Hellman continued to buy land, and he went into partnerships with Downey to buy land. And in the 1870s, he bought a large section of West Los Angeles. But the problem was there were a lot of other people who were trying to make money off of land development as well. So each of the people had to sort of sell their land in a way to make it seem attractive. And I just want to say, in one newspaper, I found an ad for this parcel of land in West LA, and the ad said, lots for sale, cheap for cash, fresh, pure breezes from the ocean. So even then, they were worried about smog in Los Angeles. Anyway, around that time, a group of men wanted to form a new university, and they were looking for a place to put it. And all the various landowners started to compete about where that university would be, because everybody knew if you got the university on your land, all of a sudden your property would become more valuable. So Hellman and his partners made an offer to build a trolley line from the center of town to this new university, and they won the right to donate 308 acres of land to this new university. Well, the university opened up in 1880, and it was very successful, and it was known as the University of Southern California. And it was a lucky break for Hellman, because he not only got to be known forevermore as one of the founders of the University of California, but the land value soared from $300 a parcel to more than $1,000 a parcel in just a year. So it was a very savvy investment. But he did one thing really wrong. He forgot to put in the contract that he would be entitled to season football tickets for the rest of his life. That really would have been good. Anyway, so as a result of that donation, the governor of California called up Hellman and asked him if he would want to be a regent of the University of California. And he was appointed in 1881, and he served for 38 years. And he was one of the largest serving regents in the university system. So, but by 1890, Hellman had grown out of LA. He wanted a bigger canvas. LA only had 50,000 residents. San Francisco had 300,000 residents. So he heard that the Nevada Bank was for sale. And Warren alluded to earlier Judy Wilbur, who was a flood. Well, her relatives were known as the Silver Kings, and they were a group of 4 people who made a huge killing in the Nevada silver mines. And while they made their money in Nevada, they spent it in San Francisco. And they erected something called the Nevada Bank, which at the time was capitalized at $10 million, which was the most any bank had ever been capitalized in the United States. And unfortunately, in about 1887, a renegade cashier had decided to corner the wheat market on his own, and he failed miserably, and the Nevada Bank was on the verge of bankruptcy. At this point, Hellman stepped in, and he made an offer to buy the Nevada Bank. And this is when his friendships really came into play, because Hellman had to raise $2.5 million to buy this bank, which was a lot of money in that time. It's still a lot of money today. So who did he turn to help him with this? He turned to his old friends from Reckendorf. He turned to all the German Jews who he had known and who he had grown close to over the years. And in fact, he had so many applications for investments in the stock that he had to turn people away. So his investors included David Walter's company, D&E Walter, the 3 Haas brothers, Levi Strauss, Daniel Meyer, another successful Jewish banker, Joseph Brandenstein, the Newstetter brothers, and Meyer Lehman in New York, and Benjamin Nugas in London. So once again, the Jews had relied on their networks to help one another out. And everybody wanted a piece of this action, and it turned out to be a very profitable investment for them.